Hi, I'm Kristen Bell, and if you know my husband Dax, then you also know he loves shopping for a car. Selling a car? Not so much.
We're really doing this, huh?
Thankfully, Carvana makes it easy. Answer a few questions, put in your VIN or license, and done. We sold ours in minutes this morning, and they'll come pick it up and pay us this afternoon.
Bye-bye, truckie.
Of course, we kept the favorite.
Hello, other truckie.
Sell your car with Carvana today. Terms and conditions apply.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Caesar's Palace for 12 rounds of boxing. In the red corner, from Los Angeles, California, wearing the red trunks with the gold trim, weighing in at 125 pounds, the lightweight champion of the world, Danny Little Red Lopez. Well, Bill, our winners get a home theater receiver. That's right. Experience the full potential of high-definition video with this 72-channel digital home theater receiver from Yamaha. But wait, that's not all. They also get a 5.1-channel surround sound system from Mirage. With 5 palm-sized speakers and a compact subwoofer cube, the MX 5.1 brings you huge immersive sound with Mirage's omnipolar technology. All from the Spiegel catalog, Chicago, Illinois, 60609. And they're taking closer order as down the stretch they come. Mr. Hot Stuff has 3 lengths to make up with chocolate candy last. On the rail, take the points behind that gallant son with chocolate candy gaining on the outside. In the lead is Pioneer of the Nile being tackled by chocolate candy. They're neck and neck as they come to the wire. And Pioneer of the Nile holds off chocolate candy and wins the Santa Anita Derby. And now, on your feet, time to greet holder of 14 NBA titles, your home team, your Los Angeles Lakers. Number 3 at 6'8", 5th year out of UCLA, playing forward, Trevor Ariza. Starting at center, number 17 at 7 feet, 4th year out of St. Andrews High School, Andrew Bynum. And at guard, number 24, 6'6", 13th season out of Loyal Marion High School, Kobe Bryant.
You know why? Because I don't really like today's fashions. You know what I miss? I miss the midi, don't you? Oh, come on. It was terrific. If you went to work, you only had to shave up to here. It was a winner, yes. Then the midi left and hot pants came in. I looked like a gorilla in sweat socks. It was just... Do you like this helmet badge? Tell me the truth. This was my wedding dress. Perhaps... Oh, really? I was going to wear white. I was 28. Grow up. But that's... My husband, thank goodness, bought the horseback riding story, and things were... I'm liberated. Because, see, in the old days, women always had to lie. Remember that? We all had to pretend we wore white, wink, wink, wink. Wasn't it unfair? A man could sleep around and sleep around. Nobody asked any questions. A woman, you made 19, 20 mistakes. You were labels.
Good morning. It's Thursday, Jordan Peterson Thursday, September the 18th, and this is The True Conservative. Welcome to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. I'm Ron, your host, and the only true conservative in the United States today. So today, after the Serenity Prayer and the patriotic song of the day, we will have Varney and Company, motivation, meditation, and Jordan Peterson. All that and more when I get back. God, Grant me the serenity to accept the things I should not change, the courage to change the things I should, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen. Thank you. Now Maria, then Varney and Company.
Morning. Let's get some final thoughts from this all-star panel. Mark Tepper.
Well, President Trump made a comment that Jensen Huang is taking over the world. And we just saw NVIDIA actually make a $5 billion investment into Intel. Super cool. I mean, you combine NVIDIA's chips with Intel's processors, and you now offer a more complete package for the build-out of these data centers.
You want to buy NVIDIA at this level?
I buy a little bit every week.
Wow.
I keep buying it. It's pricey, but it's a good company.
Paul, final thoughts here.
I try to advance the story. Look, AI, rare earth minerals, digital services tax, all of this is in service, in my estimation, to one thing. Donald Trump is looking to rally the West, re-entrench our Western values, see if we are still who we're supposed to be, get our core values back on the table. The West has to choose. He's starting with the UK.
Yeah, he really is. And the UK was the first country to actually do a trade deal with the United States.
That's right. So
we'll see what else comes out of it. It's been a great show. Thank you so much, guys. Great to see you both. Mark Tepper, Paul Morrow here. Join us tomorrow. We've got a lot coming up. Mike Milken is my special guest tomorrow. He is opening up his new Center for Advancing the American Dream, and we're going to take you there. Coming up, Varney and Company picks it up right now. He is live in London. Stu, take it away.
Good morning, Maria, and good morning, everyone. Today, the President and the Prime Minister get down to business. President Trump and Prime Minister Starmer are discussing trade, energy, money, and Ukraine. It is what's called a bilateral meeting that checkers the Prime Minister's country estate. There will be a news conference scheduled for later this hour, and you will see it. Wednesday, a lavish state banquet at which President Trump spoke of the priceless and eternal bond between the two countries. Now, the big story in money is a rally on the stock market following the Federal Reserve's decision on interest rates. A quarter-point cut now, one more later this year, one next year. Not the dramatic cut that President Trump wanted, but investors clearly like it. Look at this. Dow Industrials had been up 300, now we're up about 70 points. A solid gain. The Nasdaq, though, still holding on to a 200-point gain at this point. You better take a look at Intel. NVIDIA will put $5 billion into the company. They are co-developing chips for the AI market. The stock is up roughly 30%. The yield on the 10-year Treasury coming in now at 4.09%, and we have the 2-year coming in at 3.55%. As for Bitcoin, rallying this morning to 117,000 bucks per coin. Got to get into politics. Jimmy Kimmel has been taken off the air indefinitely. He had accused Charlie Kirk's killer of being part of the MAGA gang. And the president called his removal great news for America. Senator Schumer called it outrageous. On the show today, you will see the press conference. You will see our president take his leave of royal hospitality. I'm calling the state visit a success for both sides. America got a firm ally at a time of international tension. The Brits got money and an AI supercomputer 100 times more powerful than anything now in the UK. And they got diplomatic support. The special relationship is alive and well on this Thursday, September 18th, 2025.
And that was Maria and Stu. Nonprofit News Now. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, Machiavelli.
Right now, someone in your life knows exactly how to manipulate you because you've told them everything. You've shared your fears, your dreams, your weaknesses, your plans, your insecurities, and your strategies. You think this openness makes you trustworthy and authentic, but what it actually makes you is completely predictable and utterly controllable. While you've been playing with all your cards face up on the table, believing that transparency equals virtue, they've been collecting information about every aspect of your psychology and using it against you in ways you don't even recognize. You've been programmed to believe that hiding anything about yourself is dishonest, manipulative, or emotionally unhealthy. Society has convinced you that good people share everything, that authentic relationships require complete transparency, and that keeping parts of yourself private is somehow a moral failing. But this belief system has turned you into psychological prey for anyone who understands that information is power, and that the person who reveals everything has given away every advantage they might have had. Niccolo Machiavelli understood something about human nature that modern self-help culture has completely forgotten. The moment you become completely known, you become completely powerless. Every secret you share is leverage you've handed to someone else. Every vulnerability you expose is a weapon you've placed in their hands. Every detail about your thinking process you reveal is a manual for how to control your future decisions. Today I'm going to show you why complete transparency is psychological suicide, how the most powerful people maintain strategic mystery while appearing open and honest, and why keeping certain cards hidden isn't deception. It's survival in a world where information warfare happens in every relationship, every workplace, and every social interaction you'll ever have. Before we reveal the hidden strategies that protect the powerful while destroying the naive, here's the first disturbing truth about complete transparency that will shatter your assumptions about honesty and relationships. When you tell people everything about yourself, you're not building trust. You're eliminating their need to invest effort in understanding you. The person who reveals all their thoughts, feelings, motivations, and plans becomes as interesting as a book you've already read cover to cover. There's no mystery to uncover, no depth to discover, no reason to remain curious about who you are or what you might be capable of. Think about the people you find most fascinating and compelling. Are they the ones who immediately share every detail about their lives, opinions, and experiences? Or are they the ones who reveal interesting glimpses of depth while maintaining an air of complexity that makes you want to know more? The most magnetic people you've ever met probably shared enough to create connection while keeping enough private to maintain intrigue. This isn't about being fake or manipulative. This is about understanding that human psychology is wired to value what requires effort to obtain and to devalue what's freely given without any investment required. When someone can understand you completely without having to work for that understanding, they unconsciously categorize you as simple, predictable, and ultimately replaceable. Machiavelli observed that the most successful leaders were those who remained somewhat mysterious even to their closest advisors. They shared enough information to maintain loyalty and cooperation, while keeping enough private to maintain authority and strategic advantage. They understood that complete transparency eliminates the psychological dynamics that create respect, curiosity, and genuine influence.
This is how my dad transformed his body. It changed his life. It may change yours too.
My name is Harris.
Influence. The first principle of Machiavellian strategic opacity is what he would have called graduated revelation. This involves sharing information about yourself in layers, revealing more personal details only as relationships deepen, and trust is genuinely earned through consistent behavior over time. You're not lying or being deceptive. You're simply being selective about what you share and when you share it. Graduated revelation works because it mirrors the natural process of how intimacy and trust actually develop in healthy relationships. Most people make the mistake of either sharing too much too quickly, which can overwhelm others and make them uncomfortable, or sharing too little for too long, which can make them seem distant or untrustworthy. The art lies in calibrating your level of openness to match the actual depth of the relationship and the other person's demonstrated ability to handle personal information responsibly. This approach also protects you from people who are skilled at creating false intimacy to extract information they can use against you later. When someone pushes for personal details early in a relationship or seems unusually interested in your private thoughts and plans, graduated revelation allows you to test their motives by sharing small pieces of information and observing how they handle that information over time. People who genuinely care about you will respect your boundaries and won't pressure you to reveal more than you're comfortable sharing. People who have ulterior motives will often become impatient or manipulative when they can't immediately access all the information they want about your psychology and circumstances. The second principle is strategic ambiguity. This involves communicating in ways that allow others to understand your general position while leaving specific details, motivations, or future plans unclear. Strategic ambiguity prevents others from being able to predict your exact responses or manipulate your decisions by appealing to preferences and patterns. They think they understand completely. Strategic ambiguity shows up in how you discuss your goals, relationships, financial situation, career plans, and personal values. Instead of providing detailed explanations that give others complete pictures of your thinking, you share enough to be responsive and engaged while maintaining flexibility to change direction if circumstances warrant it. This flexibility is crucial because life is unpredictable, and the plans or preferences you share today might not serve your interests tomorrow. When you've been completely transparent about your strategies and intentions, you lose the ability to adapt without appearing inconsistent or untrustworthy. But when you've maintained some ambiguity, you can pivot when necessary without having to explain why you're changing directions. Strategic ambiguity also prevents others from using your own words against you when conflicts arise or when your interests no longer align with theirs. The person who has recorded every detail about your thoughts and plans has ammunition they can use to make you look hypocritical, inconsistent, or untrustworthy if relationships deteriorate or competitive situations develop. The third principle is what Machiavelli understood as information asymmetry maintenance. This involves consistently gathering more information about others than you reveal about yourself, creating psychological advantages that can be used strategically in negotiations, conflicts, and collaborative situations. Information asymmetry works because knowledge is power in every human interaction. When you understand someone's motivations, fears, goals, and decision-making patterns better than they understand yours, you can predict their behavior while remaining unpredictable yourself. This gives you enormous advantages in situations where outcomes depend on psychological insight and strategic thinking. Maintaining information asymmetry requires being genuinely interested in others while being selective about what you reveal about yourself. You ask thoughtful questions, listen carefully to answers, observe behavior patterns, and remember important details about people's psychology and circumstances. Meanwhile, you share enough about yourself to maintain social reciprocity, without providing the detailed psychological profiles that would allow others to manipulate you effectively. This isn't about being secretive or manipulative. It's about being strategically intelligent in a world where most people are unconsciously engaging in information warfare without realizing it. Every personal detail you share can potentially be used to influence your future decisions or undermine your position in competitive situations. The fourth principle is emotional opacity. This involves maintaining some privacy around your emotional reactions, triggers, and internal processing while still being emotionally available and responsive in your relationships. Emotional opacity prevents others from being able to manipulate your feelings or use your emotional patterns against you. Emotional opacity doesn't mean being cold, distant, or emotionally unavailable. It means not wearing every emotion on your sleeve or immediately sharing every feeling you experience. When someone always knows exactly how you're feeling and what's affecting your emotional state, they can easily manipulate those feelings to influence your behavior and decisions. This principle is particularly important in professional environments, where emotional reactions can be seen as signs of weakness or instability. The person who remains somewhat mysterious about their internal emotional landscape appears more professional, stable, and leadership-worthy than the person who immediately shares every feeling and reaction. Emotional opacity also protects you from people who are skilled at emotional manipulation, those who can trigger specific emotional states to make you more compliant, more generous, more defensive, or more likely to make decisions that serve their interests rather than your own. But here's where Machiavellian strategic opacity becomes truly sophisticated. It's not about being secretive for the sake of being secretive or maintaining mystery just to seem interesting. The most effective practitioners use strategic opacity to protect their ability to make decisions based on their genuine interests rather than on social pressure or other people's expectations. The fifth principle is what Machiavelli would have called option preservation. This involves avoiding commitments, promises, or detailed explanations that would limit your future flexibility or lock you into positions that might not serve your interests if circumstances change. Option preservation works because life is fundamentally uncertain, and the positions that seem optimal today might be completely wrong tomorrow. When you've been completely transparent about your plans, values, and intentions, you create social and psychological pressure to remain consistent with those stated positions, even when changing would be in your best interest. This principle shows up in how you discuss future plans, relationship expectations, career goals, and personal commitments. Instead of making detailed promises or rigid commitments, you maintain enough flexibility to adapt to changing circumstances without appearing unreliable or untrustworthy. Option preservation also protects you from people who might try to hold you to casual statements or tentative plans as if they were binding commitments. When you've maintained some ambiguity about your future intentions, you can't be manipulated through guilt or social pressure based on things you said when you had different information or different circumstances. The sixth principle is competence concealment. This involves not immediately revealing the full extent of your knowledge, skills, or capabilities, allowing others to underestimate you while maintaining strategic advantages that can be deployed when they're most useful. Competence concealment doesn't mean pretending to be incompetent or hiding your abilities entirely. It means being selective about when and how you demonstrate your full capabilities, allowing others to form incomplete pictures of what you're capable of achieving. This approach provides several strategic advantages. It prevents others from feeling threatened by your abilities before they've had time to appreciate your character and intentions. It allows you to exceed expectations rather than struggling to meet inflated expectations based on early demonstrations of competence. And it gives you the element of surprise when challenging situations require you to perform at levels others didn't know you could achieve. Competence concealment is particularly valuable in competitive environments where showing all your cards early might make you a target for sabotage or might motivate others to work harder to match or exceed your performance. The seventh principle is what Machiavelli understood as alliance flexibility. This involves maintaining enough privacy about your relationships, loyalties, and social connections that you can adapt your alliances if circumstances change without appearing disloyal or opportunistic. Alliance flexibility recognizes that relationships and loyalties often need to evolve as situations change. New information becomes available, or people's behavior reveals character traits that weren't initially apparent. When you've been completely transparent about your relationships and loyalties, changing those alignments becomes much more difficult without damaging your reputation for consistency and trustworthiness. This doesn't mean being disloyal or betraying people's trust. It means not broadcasting every detail about your relationships and social connections, leaving yourself psychological room to adjust those relationships if behavior or circumstances warrant it. Alliance flexibility also protects you from guilt manipulation or social pressure based on past statements about relationships that may no longer be appropriate or beneficial to maintain at the same level. The eighth principle is vulnerability selectivity. This involves being strategic about which vulnerabilities you share and with whom you share them, recognizing that every weakness you reveal can potentially be exploited by people whose interests conflict with yours. Vulnerability selectivity doesn't mean never being vulnerable or authentic. It means being wise about what personal information you share, making sure that your vulnerability serves constructive purposes, like building genuine intimacy with trustworthy people, rather than providing manipulation opportunities for those who might exploit your openness. This principle requires developing good judgment about people's character and motives, sharing more personal information with those who have demonstrated genuine care and trustworthiness, while maintaining more privacy with those who haven't yet proven themselves worthy of deeper access to your inner world. The ultimate goal of Machiavellian strategic opacity isn't to become secretive, manipulative, or emotionally unavailable. It's to protect your psychological autonomy and strategic flexibility, while still building genuine relationships and maintaining personal integrity. The most successful practitioners appear open, honest, and emotionally available, while maintaining enough privacy to protect their interests and preserve their options. This balance requires wisdom about what to share, when to share it, and with whom to share it. It requires understanding that true intimacy and trust develop gradually through consistent behavior over time, not through immediate, complete transparency that can overwhelm others and eliminate the natural psychological dynamics that create lasting bonds. The people who master strategic opacity often seem the most trustworthy because they've demonstrated good judgment about boundaries and appropriate levels of sharing. They create intrigue without being mysterious, maintain flexibility without being inconsistent, and protect themselves without being defensive. But let's go deeper into the psychology of why strategic opacity is so effective in creating respect and influence. When you maintain some mystery about yourself, you force other people to invest mental energy in trying to understand you. This psychological investment creates what Machiavelli would have recognized as cognitive ownership. People value more highly the things they have to work to understand or obtain. The person who immediately reveals everything about themselves eliminates this investment requirement, which paradoxically makes them seem less valuable and interesting even when their actual qualities might be superior to someone who maintains strategic mystery. This is why job candidates who seem to have multiple options appear more valuable than equally qualified candidates who seem desperate for any position, and why romantic partners who maintain some independence and mystery often receive more attention and respect than those who make themselves completely available. Strategic opacity also protects you from what Machiavelli understood as familiarity contempt, the psychological tendency for people to lose respect for those they know too completely. When someone has seen all your weaknesses, heard all your stories, and understands all your patterns, they often begin to take you for granted because there are no surprises left to discover. This familiarity breeding contempt isn't a character flaw in others. It's a natural psychological process that happens when mystery and challenge are completely removed from relationships. The most enduring relationships and professional partnerships are often those where people continue to discover new aspects of each other over years or even decades, rather than those where everything was revealed in the first few months. When you understand how to be selectively transparent while maintaining strategic opacity, you can build authentic relationships while protecting your ability to adapt to changing circumstances. You can be emotionally available without being emotionally manipulable, and you can be honest without being psychologically naive. This balance allows you to create genuine connections while preserving the psychological dynamics that maintain interest, respect, and influence over time. The most sophisticated practitioners of strategic opacity also understand that what you choose not to reveal is often more powerful than what you do reveal. The gaps in your story, the questions you don't answer fully, the aspects of your life you keep private, these create psychological space that others fill with their own projections and assumptions, often attributing to you qualities that are more impressive than whatever reality might actually exist. If this exploration of strategic transparency has given you new insights into how to protect your psychological autonomy while building genuine relationships, make sure to like this video and share it with someone who could benefit from understanding these sophisticated dynamics. And if you want to continue learning about the psychological principles that separate those who thrive from those who are constantly taken advantage of, subscribe and turn on notifications, because we're just beginning to explore what's possible when you understand how information, power, and relationships really work. Remember, in a world where information is power, the person who shares everything has given away all their power to people who share nothing. The choice between naive transparency and strategic wisdom, between being an open book and maintaining psychological autonomy, between being completely known and remaining strategically mysterious, is always yours to make in every relationship and every interaction throughout your life.
And that was a little bit of Machiavelli. Back in a minute. Thank you, and now a little bit of motivation.
What do you do when it seems like suffering won't stop? What do you do when it feels like your pain doesn't have a point? What does it do when it feels like your weaknesses continue to worsen?
Maybe you've taken a knockdown concerning your finances lately. Maybe it's with your kids, maybe with your marriage, maybe with your health, maybe some other arena of life. You're laying on the mat, gasping, and you don't know what you're going to do.
People ask you how you are, and you say fine, but you're not fine, and they'll never know that.
We're people. We're people, and we struggle, and we suffer, and we bleed, and we cry. And if you think that true strength means never showing any weakness, then I'm here to tell you, you're wrong. You're wrong because it's the opposite.
You're gonna get depressed sometimes. You're gonna have weeks where you don't feel like eating, where gravity is working overtime like it's afraid of getting laid off and you can barely lift your fork to your mouth, and you are going to have a choice.
You have a choice to either give up or keep going. Give up or get up. It's like you have to save your own life. Nobody's going to be able to save it for you. So we have to do what we have to do, no matter what it is.
We all struggle. We all know what it is to hurt. We all know what it is to have pain in our heart. And you know what? It's okay. That's just a part of life. As much as I hate some of the parts of my life depression has dragged me down to, in a lot of ways I'm grateful for it. Because yeah, it's put me in the valleys, but only to show me there's peaks. And yeah, it's dragged me through the dark, but only to remind me there is light.
Life is not always good. Life is not always rosy. Life is worth living. When you fail, try again. And again. And again.
Hold on to that fundamental quality of faith. Have faith that on the other side of your pain is something good.
I believe that this is your beginning, but this doesn't have to be your end. That just because you are currently here, this is your present circumstances, that life don't have to end for you right now. This might be a page in your life. It might even be a chapter in your life, but it ain't the book, baby. You are not finished writing yet, so I need you to get busy living. Are you hearing me? I need you to get busy living. There is still time. As long as there's breath in your nostrils, as long as you can wake up in the morning, you still in the game, which means if you're in the game and there's still time in the game, still time left in the game, you can still win the game.
The last chapter of your story has not been written yet. The fact that you're here today is a testament to the fact that the devil hasn't been able to destroy you.
You're in the darkest place in your life right now. You're at the darkest place in your life right now. Hold on. Don't give up. Don't quit. You're at the darkest point in your life. If you could just look at your situation from a different angle and realize that beauty does come from death.
Are you in a storm or are you just in between two miracles?
You take those terrible events in your life and you create a new story of triumph. We got to become something new. We take those traumas, we take that pain, and we allow it to become a part of who we want to be. What if I told you that there's greatness on the other side of your darkness, that there is joy on the other side of your pain?
What if I told you you got everything you need to make it through your storm? This storm will not take you out.
And I know you've been tired, and I know it's been hurting, and I know it's been lifelong, and it might be an addiction. It may be wondering how much longer you're going to have a job, or when you're going to get one, or when this is all going to be over. But you're not going to die in this trial. You're going to make it. In fact, you're going to be better.
I want you to look in the mirror and I want you to tell yourself, I am a survivor. Listen to me and you can get through this. I want you to speak life into that thing. Whatever it is, what's frustrating you, like for real, you feel like I can't go through another day like this. I can't handle it. I can't take it. Listen to me very closely. Say it with me and breathe life into whatever that thing is. Whatever your circumstances are, say with me, I can. I can. I can get through this. I will. I will get through this. I must.
And that was a little bit of motivation. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now a little meditation. And that was a little bit of meditation. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, Jordan Peterson.
You know, it's a peculiar thing how people treat those who offer them the most, especially when it comes to narcissists. They'll devalue, dismiss, diminish. And why? Because confronting the truth of your worth means confronting the inadequacy of their character. See, the tragedy of the narcissist isn't that they lose you. It's that they never really saw you to begin with. And by the time they do, it's already too late. The narcissist is often celebrated for their charm, their confidence, their magnetism. But what people fail to recognize is how much of this persona is built on illusion. It's a carefully constructed mask, one that allows them to navigate the world without ever confronting their own vulnerability. And in that performance, they become experts at manipulation, experts at distortion, particularly when it comes to those who care for them the most. But this comes with a cost. They become blind to genuine value. They cannot see the very thing they most desperately need, even when it's standing right in front of them. When someone with a narcissistic mindset enters a relationship, whether romantic, familial, or professional, they enter it with a hidden premise that people are tools to be used, mirrors to reflect back the image they want to see. So when someone comes into their life who is grounded, empathic, resilient, someone who listens, who gives, who forgives, they don't respond with appreciation. They respond with suspicion. They see compassion as weakness. They see humility as inferiority. And worst of all, they confuse your generosity with obligation. They believe they are entitled to your goodness, as if you exist to reinforce their distorted sense of superiority. But you weren't weak. You were strong in a way they couldn't comprehend. You were steady, not passive. You endured not because you lacked self-respect, but because you hoped they would change, that they might grow into the person you believed they could be. And in that hope, in that investment of time and energy and care, you revealed the depths of your character. You gave them access to a kind of loyalty, a kind of presence that is incredibly rare, and they missed it. Not because you didn't show it clearly enough, but because they weren't equipped to recognize it. To the narcissist, real love is almost incomprehensible. It demands vulnerability, reciprocity, accountability, all things they are fundamentally unwilling to offer. So when you showed up with honesty, with emotional clarity, with patience, they couldn't meet you there. In fact, they likely resented you for it. Your authenticity highlighted their inauthenticity. Your emotional maturity cast a spotlight on their emotional immaturity. And rather than face that truth, they distorted it. They minimized your contributions, criticized your character, perhaps even tried to convince you that you were the problem. This blindness, this inability to recognize what they had, isn't accidental. It's strategic. It allows them to preserve their fragile self-immusion. Admitting your value would mean admitting their failure to honor it. It would mean acknowledging their own limitations, their own cruelty, their own dependency on someone they refuse to validate. And narcissists do not do well with self-confrontation. So instead, they build a narrative where you were never enough, where your boundaries were attacks, where your needs were burdens. But here's the thing. Deep down, somewhere buried beneath all that defensiveness and projection, there is a flicker of recognition. They knew you were different. They knew you were stable, loyal, kind, in a way that was not transactional. That recognition is part of what made them so reactive. It scared them, because if they allowed themselves to fully admit your value, they'd have to reckon with what that says about them and what they stood to lose. But they buried that realization. And when you finally walked away, or when the relationship collapsed under the weight of their dysfunction, they told themselves they were better off. For a while, they might even believe it. They distract themselves. They find new sources of attention, new people to charm, new illusions to feed. But eventually the pattern repeats. The superficial highs give way to emptiness. The validation they crave becomes harder to extract. And in that silence, in that loneliness, a thought begins to form. What if they were the best thing I ever had? But by then, you're gone. You're healing, you've rebuilt, and they're left with the echo of what they once dismissed. Their blindness wasn't just a failure to see your worth. It was a refusal to see their own wounds, their own need for control, their fear of intimacy. They couldn't receive what you offered because to do so would mean facing everything they've spent their lives avoiding. Your worth was never dependent on their recognition, no matter how much it felt that way in the moment. That's one of the most insidious aspects of being entangled with a narcissist. They train you, often subtly and over time, to see yourself through their distorted lens. They chip away at your confidence, not always with obvious insults or cruelty, but through quiet dismissals, invalidation, and a constant withholding of emotional attunement. They don't give you the mirror of healthy reflection. Instead, they give you a cracked one that warps your image just enough to make you question your own value. In the beginning, there's often admiration, even idealization. They may praise you, elevate you, make you feel like you're uniquely special. But that's not appreciation, that's strategy. It's the foundation of a dynamic built on control. Once they've secured your emotional investment, once you start depending on that praise for your sense of connection and self-esteem, they begin to withdraw it. They start to devalue, criticize, withhold affection, and introduce doubt. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, you begin to orient your sense of worth around their approval. You try harder, you overextend, you shrink, and you do all of it in the hope that you'll get back to the person they were in the beginning, not realizing that person never truly existed. What you're responding to isn't love, it's manipulation. It's a system designed to keep you in a cycle of hope and disappointment where your self-worth is constantly on the line. And because the high of their approval felt so intense, so affirming, the absence of it feels like a punishment. This is where so many people get trapped, in the belief that if they were just a bit more patient, more understanding, less demanding, more selfless, then maybe they'd earn back that affection. Maybe they'd finally be enough. But the truth is, you were already enough. And not in some abstract self-help way. You were enough because your value is inherent. It's not something to be measured by someone else's broken standard. The narcissist couldn't see your worth, not because it wasn't there, but because they were never looking for it in the first place. They weren't interested in your soul, your growth, your humanity. They were interested in control. They were interested in what you could give them emotionally without them having to give anything real back. And so, the lie you began to internalize, that your value was contingent on their attention or affection, was a reflection of their dysfunction, not your inadequacy. When they ignored your needs, it wasn't because your needs were too much. When they minimized your accomplishments, it wasn't because those accomplishments weren't real. When they criticized your emotions, it wasn't because you were too sensitive. It was because acknowledging your depth, your intelligence, your strength, that would force them to confront their own lack of those things. What happens in this dynamic is a profound loss of perspective. You begin to forget who you were before their voice replaced your inner voice. You stop seeing yourself clearly, and that is one of the deepest harms caused by narcissistic abuse, the erosion of self-trust. But even in that erosion, even in the moments where you doubted yourself most, your worth remained unchanged. It was never tied to their perception. Their recognition or lack of it didn't define you, it revealed them. There's a kind of liberation that comes with reclaiming your identity outside of their narrative. It's not just about healing, it's about remembering. Remembering the parts of yourself that existed before the manipulation. Remembering that you were once someone who didn't need permission to feel proud, to speak up, to believe in your own goodness. The narcissist may have clouded that image, but they never destroyed it. You still carried that value quietly beneath the weight of their disapproval. Even now, in hindsight, when you reflect on all the times you gave more than you received, when you recall the moments you stood by them at your own expense, when you think of the energy you spent trying to prove your loyalty, all of that is evidence of your character, not their worthiness of it. You weren't lacking. You were overgiving. You weren't too emotional. You were emotionally honest in a space that punished truth. And those qualities, the ones they tried to shame, are the very qualities that make you valuable beyond their comprehension. Their inability to honor your worth doesn't diminish it. It simply exposes the limitations of their perception. When someone with narcissistic tendencies begins to devalue you, it's often not because of anything you've done wrong. In fact, it's often a reaction to everything you've done right. Your empathy, your emotional intelligence, your willingness to show up authentically. These qualities can be deeply threatening to someone who has spent their entire life hiding behind a facade. For a narcissist, relationships aren't about connection. They're about control. And the moment they sense that someone sees through their mask or begins to challenge their narrative, they strike back, not with self-reflection, but with projection. Projection is one of the narcissist's most powerful and frequently used defense mechanisms. Instead of facing their own flaws, their insecurities, their deep-rooted fears of inadequacy, they shift the focus outward. They take what they cannot tolerate in themselves and attribute it to you. If they feel insecure, they accuse you of being needy. If they feel guilt, they say you're too sensitive. If they fear abandonment, they start claiming that you're the one pulling away or being distant. The devaluation isn't rooted in truth. It's rooted in their inability to cope with their own internal chaos. This is why being in a relationship with a narcissist can be so confusing. You start to question reality. You begin to doubt your memory, your intentions, your feelings. They criticize you for things you never said or twist your words into meanings you never intended. Over time, you start to carry shame that was never yours to begin with. And that's exactly what they want. Because the more you focus on defending yourself against their accusations, the less attention you give to their dysfunction. It's a kind of emotional sleight of hand. You become so occupied with proving your goodness, explaining your intentions, and trying to earn back their approval that you don't notice how much of yourself you're giving away. The narcissist creates a dynamic where you are perpetually on trial, and they are both the accuser and the judge. And every time you react, every time you try to explain or justify yourself, you reinforce their control. But behind this behavior lies a fundamental truth. Their devaluation of you has little to do with who you are and everything to do with who they are afraid of being. Narcissists often carry deep wounds, experiences of rejection, neglect, or humiliation that they've never processed. Rather than confront those wounds and heal them, they build an identity that denies vulnerability. They construct a self-image of superiority, perfection, and entitlement. But when confronted with someone who is genuinely strong, someone who leads with compassion, integrity, and authenticity, it threatens to unravel that false image. You, in your sincerity, become a mirror they cannot bear to look into. And rather than take responsibility for their discomfort, they try to shatter the mirror. They do this through gaslighting, blame shifting, silent treatments, and emotional withdrawal. They make you feel as though your pain is an inconvenience, your boundaries are attacks, and your needs are unreasonable. This isn't just emotional immaturity, it's self-preservation for them. They cannot face the truth that they are the ones failing to show up, so they construct a reality in which you are the problem. But no amount of projection can change the truth. Their accusations may sting and their silence may confuse, but underneath it all, they are simply running from themselves. The more you try to appease them, the more power they gain. And the more power they gain, the more distorted their version of you becomes. This cycle of projection and devaluation isn't about revealing who you are. It's about concealing who they are. It's important to recognize that many of the things they criticize in you are the very things they lack. If they accuse you of being dishonest, it's likely because they are hiding something. If they call you selfish, it's often because they are unable to give without expecting something in return. If they say you're weak, it's because your emotional openness exposes their emotional repression. Their words say more about their fears than your character. Understanding this dynamic is not about excusing their behavior, it's about reclaiming your perspective. When you begin to see their devaluation as projection, you stop taking it personally. You stop internalizing their shame and confusion. You begin to understand that their narrative is not your identity. Their judgment is not a measure of your value. And their inability to recognize your worth is not a reflection of your inadequacy. There comes a point in the narcissistic dynamic where the realization begins to set in, not for you, but for them. It doesn't happen in the heat of the breakup, and it rarely occurs while you're still emotionally available to them. Instead, it arrives in the aftermath, often long after the damage is done, when the narcissist starts to recognize what they let slip through their fingers. But this realization comes too late, and that delay is part of the consequence they inevitably face. The person they dismissed, devalued, and discarded turns out to be the person who held them together more than they understood. In the beginning, they see you as replaceable. In their world, people are interchangeable. Relationships are transactional. They believe they can always find someone else to fill the role you played. And because they confuse attention for affection and validation for love, they assume there will always be a new source of admiration waiting in the wings. They don't realize that what you gave them wasn't just surface level praise. It was emotional labor, consistency, depth, and patience. These are qualities that can't be replicated easily, and certainly not by someone who only sees themselves through the lens of external approval. So they move on quickly, often visibly. They want you to see how unfazed they are, how easily they can replace you. They flaunt new relationships or distractions. They manufacture a narrative where they are thriving while you're presumably stuck in the pain they left behind. But underneath that performance is an emptiness they haven't yet confronted. They're not thriving, they're avoiding. They're not fulfilled, they're searching for the same emotional security you once gave them without acknowledging that it was you who created it. And the problem is they start to encounter people who aren't you, people who won't tolerate their games, people who mirror back their dysfunction rather than absorb it, people who don't see them as special or unique. Slowly, the charm begins to wear thin, and the emotional return on their manipulation starts to diminish. They realize that getting attention isn't the same as being loved. They notice that others don't show the same patience, the same emotional depth, the same willingness to understand. That's when the dissonance begins to grow. They start to compare. They start to remember. Not in the way a healthy person reflects on a lost relationship, but in a way that's tinged with entitlement and regret. They remember how you were there during their lowest moments, how you made excuses for their behavior, tried to understand their past, believed in their potential. They remember the times you reached out even when they shut down, the way you forgave things others would have walked away from. But they don't remember it with gratitude. They remember it with frustration because now that it's gone, they can't replicate it. They realize they had access to something rare and meaningful, and they threw it away not because it wasn't valuable, but because they didn't recognize the value when they had it. This realization, though delayed, is inevitable. It creeps in during moments of silence, when distractions no longer work, and when the admiration of others begins to feel hollow. It reveals itself when they're faced with consequences they can't manipulate their way out of, when people stop buying the charm, when patterns repeat, when loneliness becomes a chronic condition instead of a temporary state. And in that space, they are confronted with the truth they spent the entire relationship trying to avoid. They lost something real, and it was their own fault. By the time they understand what they had, you're no longer accessible in the same way. You've grown, you've grieved, you've rebuilt, and you've likely realized that the version of you who tolerated their behavior no longer exists. They want the old you, the one who didn't yet see through the manipulation, the one who kept giving without receiving. But that version of you was a chapter, not a destination. They don't get to go back because you've moved forward. Their realization isn't redemptive. It doesn't lead to meaningful change because the insight isn't born of empathy, it's born of loss. They want what you gave them, but they don't want to become the kind of person who can sustain it. That's the consequence. They understand the cost, but not the lesson. They want the reward without doing the work. And now they're left with a memory, a missed opportunity, and a narrative they can no longer control. Healing begins the moment you walk away, not just physically, but emotionally and mentally. It doesn't always look dramatic or loud. Sometimes it's quiet, subtle. A slow internal shift that starts when you stop trying to earn love from someone incapable of giving it. That's when the real work begins. Not the work of forgetting them, but the work of remembering yourself. After enduring the confusion, gaslighting, and emotional exhaustion of a relationship with a narcissist, the path to healing starts with reclaiming the parts of you that were buried under their control. When you walk away, you might not feel immediate relief. In fact, what often follows is a kind of emotional detox. There's sadness, guilt, self-doubt, and even grief. Not just for the relationship itself, but for the illusion you held on to. You grieve the version of them you thought was real. You grieve the future you envisioned. But with every wave of emotion, something starts to shift. You begin to see the truth more clearly. The fog starts to lift, and what once confused you now feels more obvious. The inconsistency, the blame shifting, the way your needs were minimized, it all starts to make sense. In that clarity, the healing deepens. You start to question the beliefs that were implanted during the relationship. Were you really too sensitive, or were your emotions just inconvenient for someone who didn't want to be accountable? Were your boundaries really unreasonable, or did they simply threaten the control they had over you? As you unpack these questions, you begin to separate your identity from their narrative. You stop defining yourself by their criticisms, and you start recognizing how much strength it took just to survive that relationship. The narcissist thrives in an environment where you doubt yourself. So the moment you begin to trust your own perceptions again, the spell breaks. You no longer internalize their voice as your inner critic. You replace it with your own voice, one that is kinder, more patient, and grounded in reality. That shift is not just recovery, it's transformation. You're not simply returning to who you were before them. You're becoming someone wiser, more self-aware, and more attuned to what healthy love looks like. As you rebuild, the little things begin to matter. Peace becomes a priority. Silence no longer feels like punishment, but like sanctuary. You start enjoying your own company again. You engage with people who don't make you question your worth. You have conversations where you don't have to defend your feelings or shrink yourself to be accepted. These are signs that your nervous system is healing, that your emotional world is recalibrating. You no longer live in a state of constant hypervigilance, anticipating criticism or withdrawal. You're learning how to feel safe again, not just in your environment, but in your own skin. There's power in choosing yourself after being taught to prioritize someone else's needs at your own expense. You begin to recognize that self-love isn't indulgence, it's protection. It's boundaries. It's knowing when to walk away, not because you're giving up, but because you finally understand your own value. And that understanding reshapes everything. It changes the way you speak to yourself. It changes the relationships you allow into your life. It changes how you respond to red flags, not with justification, but with discernment. Healing also involves letting go of the fantasy that they'll change, that one day they'll wake up and realize what they lost, that the apology you always hoped for will arrive, and it will somehow make things feel whole. But you learn that closure doesn't come from them. It comes from within. It comes from accepting that their inability to love you properly had nothing to do with how lovable you are. It was about their limitations, not your lack. And that realization frees you from the invisible tether that kept you hoping, waiting, doubting. The moment you walk away, you begin to gather the pieces of yourself they tried to scatter. Piece by piece, you rebuild. And in that process, you start to see that you were never broken, just misled. Your empathy was never a flaw. Your hope was never foolish. Your desire to make things work came from a place of integrity, not weakness. Healing reveals all of this, slowly and steadily, until one day you realize that you no longer feel the need to explain, justify, or prove yourself to anyone who made you feel small. There comes a time when the silence you once feared becomes the very space where your strength begins to echo. In the aftermath of being discarded, devalued, or emotionally dismantled by someone who could not see your worth, you begin to hear a different voice, your own. It's quiet at first, almost drowned out by the chaos they left behind, but it grows louder each time you choose not to chase, not to explain, not to return. It grows louder each time you choose yourself over the illusion they sold you. And slowly, the narrative starts to shift. You're no longer a victim of their manipulation. You're the author of your own story. The narcissist thrives on reaction. Their power is fueled by your confusion, your anger, your heartbreak. They bait you with silence, hoping you'll break it with a desperate plea. They drop breadcrumbs of attention to test if they still control your emotional world. And in the past, it may have worked. You may have felt compelled to reach out, to find closure, to understand. But at some point, you stop taking the bait, not out of bitterness, but out of clarity. You realize that your energy is sacred and their chaos no longer deserves a seat at your table. That shift is not small. It's a profound moment of awakening. It's when you start living not in response to their behavior, but in alignment with your own values. It's when you stop rehearsing conversations in your head, wondering what you could have said differently. It's when you recognize that the only thing more exhausting than their presence was the weight of constantly doubting yourself around them. That exhaustion lifts the moment you give yourself permission to no longer care about their opinion. Not because you don't feel, but because you finally see the cost of giving them emotional real estate. This is where true confidence is born, not in the absence of pain, but in the decision to feel it fully and keep moving forward. Confidence is not loud or arrogant. It's steady. It's in the way you stop explaining yourself to people who never listened. It's in the way you enforce boundaries without apology. It's in the way you trust your gut even when it goes against what you were once conditioned to accept. Confidence is what grows in the space they tried to fill with self-doubt. When the narcissist realizes you were the best thing they ever had, it doesn't come with celebration or growth. It comes with emptiness. They feel your absence not because they've changed, but because their new sources of validation fall short. They remember the attention, the support, the emotional grounding you gave them. Not because they finally appreciate it, but because they missed the control it afforded them. They remember the way you forgave, the way you tried, the way you saw the best in them. But they remember it as something they lost, not something they failed to honor. And by the time they realize what they had, it no longer matters, because you've already outgrown the version of you that tolerated the bare minimum. You've stopped waiting for recognition from someone who only valued what you could do for them. You've stopped needing validation from someone who couldn't even validate their own feelings. And that self-possession, that unshakable sense of peace, is what they can't replace. The irony is that they finally see your value in your absence. But what they don't understand is that the version of you they're mourning no longer exists. You're no longer the person they could guilt into staying, silenced with criticism, or confused with mixed signals. You're no longer the emotional supply they can tap into when their ego feels bruised. You're no longer seeking closure from someone who benefits from keeping the door half open. You've closed that door, not with hatred, but with self-respect. There is power in the quiet. There is strength in choosing not to engage. There is liberation in being unbothered. And that stillness, that unwavering calm in the wake of their storm is what haunts them the most. Not your anger, not your sadness, but because when they realize they can no longer access your energy, your presence, your forgiveness, they are left to sit with the void they tried to fill with your suffering. And in that silence, the truth becomes undeniable. They lost something they will never replace.
And that was Jordan Peterson. I like Jordan Peterson because he packs so much into so little time. Back in a minute. Thank you. This is Ron, your host, the only true conservative in the United States today, bidding adios to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there, and reminding you that moral relativism is immoral.
This is the story of the one. As a maintenance supervisor at a manufacturing facility, he knows keeping the line up and running is a top priority. That's why he chooses Grainger. Because when a drive belt gets damaged, Grainger makes it easy to find the exact specs for the replacement product he needs. And next-day delivery helps ensure he'll have everything in place and running like clockwork. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.